All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good early evening, late afternoon to those on the East Coast. Please come on into the room. Thank you for your patience with us. We had slight technical difficulty earlier. Dr. Aker, can you still hear me out there?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, sir.
Great,
We
great.
have
All right.
a special guest here today. He is a dear friend and brother, one who is a giant in faith, mind, and intellect, passion for preaching, passion for pastoring. He has led his church outstanding through various seasons, and now here in this very unique, unusual season, he is excelling as well, both on the areas of COVID-19, being in New York, the epicenter for so long in America, and then civil unrest, again, New York being very progressive minded, being active both in protest and policy as it relates to this subject. We could not have one with more in depth, with more profundity as it relates to how to speak to this subject. We hope in this time to get to learn a little bit more about him in general, and then to find out how God is using him in this very, once again, unique and unusual times to lead God's people to a better understanding of what it is that we ought to be doing in light of this dispensation, these unique times. And I use that word dispensation in a less technical theological sense and a more general literal sense from a social standpoint. Let me begin by just asking my dear friend, how are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. This is a good day, good week, and just thankful. Busy time, but I'm thankful through it all.
Tell us a little bit about where you've been. You talked about this being busy times. Tell us a little bit about what you have been facing, both mentally and professionally and socially as a father and a husband in light of COVID-19 and now in the latest civil unrest of which you and I and many of our ilk already knew about this, but when this sort of pseudo awakening that is taking place in our culture.
Yeah. Well, there's various layers to that. On the one hand, as you said, multitasking as a father, as a pastor, as a husband, trying to fill those roles, and then with the COVID-19 and being here in the epicenter of that earlier, I would say in February and March, very, very trying, very difficult in New York. We are in what they are terming as phase 2 right now. That started yesterday. So restaurants are reopening and things of that nature. So it's still a pretty dicey time, but we're trying to get through it. And then, on top of that, and you and I have talked about this on numerous times with the protests and the catalyst of George Floyd and coming into this great awakening, if you will, for some people in terms of this 400-year pandemic that we've had.
Praise God. Thank you for sharing. If you're watching here on Facebook, YouTube, please like us. Please share this. Let us know you're out there. Just drop a line in the comment box. Good to see Keisha. Bailey Robinson is there, and she's going to be with us tomorrow with her wonderful sister and amazing mom having the same conversation. Dr. Aker, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about where you're from, your call into ministry, your journey to your present locale.
Yeah, I grew up I was born in California. My dad was a Methodist pastor. And so we literally moved every 3 years with the different Methodist placements. And so I was born in Northern California, in Oakland. Then we moved to Atlanta. Then we moved to Memphis, Tennessee. Then we moved to Dallas, Texas. And it was there that I would really call my formative years for grade school, graduated from high school in Dallas. And it was while living in Dallas that we joined the Concord Baptist Church, under the leadership of the late, great Dr. E.K. Bailey. And so it was there that I really came into my own as a young intern minister, seminarian at Dallas Theological Seminary, and really had an opportunity to grow and see ministry and staffing at an incredible rate. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's amazing, the things that Dr. Bailey was exposing us to then, 40 years ago, are the very trends that are being seen right now. Small groups, staffing, because African American churches were known for staffing and what have you. And then, of course, just expository preaching, doing that like none other. So I've been really blessed to have strong mentors in that sense with my grandfather, my father, Dr. Bailey, under his tutelage. And then after I graduated from Dallas Seminary, my wife and I, we moved to New Haven, Connecticut. I did some work at Yale University, Yale Divinity School, got an STM there, did historical theology and African American history in the university. And then after that, went to Drew University, worked on a PhD in church history. And at that time, we were living in Connecticut still. I was commuting back and forth. And then I got a call from Dr. Harry Starks Wright at the Cornerstone Baptist Church here in Brooklyn. And I had met him through a mutual friend, Dr. Frederick Haynes III. He would often do the yearly revival at Cornerstone. And so we went down to hear him, drove in from Connecticut, came to Brooklyn, and heard him preach that night. He introduced me to Dr. Right that night. That was in the fall of 1995. Introduced me to him that night. I've been at Cornerstone ever since then.
Wow, that's
a long
amazing.
story short.
Yeah. You went through a lot to get to a lot and dropped some major names in the process of doing so, and experiences as well. So let's go back a little bit before we dive in again to what our present topic will ultimately be. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised, a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. As I said, my father was a Methodist pastor, and so my mom, my sister was younger than I am. We were often moving, but my formative years were there in Dallas, Texas. Great experiences growing up. Lifelong friends. We still go back to Dallas several times a year. My wife is from Dallas, and so that's still technically home away from home for us. So the Southern accent that you hear, that's being reared in Texas. And even further than that, my grandparents migrated from Louisiana to California. And that migration pipeline from Mississippi and Louisiana to California, unless they were going to Chicago or Detroit. And so my grandparents migrated to California. And so I have family out there. And so that's why I'm always fun to come out there and see those family members. But I mean, I don't have any regrets. I mean, I've been tremendously blessed with mentors and family. And so that's really kind of the foundation, if you will, for my ministry.
Wow. So, and you go to California, you end up back in Dallas. And you start working. How do you get connected with Concord? How does that process happen, becoming a research
Yeah,
assistant?
that was as grew up there as a child. Went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. for undergrad, and preached my initial sermon, or as we say down south, my trial sermon, my junior year of college. And so Dr. Bailey would always have me preach whenever I was home in the summer. And so after I graduated from Howard, looking at seminaries, he strongly suggested that I attend Dallas Seminary because it would give me the tools that I would need in terms of languages, Hebrew, Greek, Old Testament, New Testament. And, he basically said, listen, theologically, they're much more conservative. They're not going to be where we are. But working at the church with me, we can offset the theological tone that will be set there. And so that was just an incredible match to be in a striving and cutting edge African American church, but at the same time to be able to get solid exegetical classes, but not taking in the conservative, ultra conservative theology, which really wouldn't meet us where we are today.
Mhm. And tell me about some of the things that you experienced there. How was that? How was it being that close to a giant? Um,
I mean, it was phenomenal. I mean, I was Dr. Bailey's, as you said, I was his research assistant for 4 years. And so, every day for 4 years, every Sunday, we were working on a series. We were working on body body parts of a sermon, from introduction to just basic illustrations. Dr. Bailey, as I said, was an expository preacher par excellence. And so he really took that craft to another level. And so, and that was before we had the internet or any type of research devices. So I spent a lot of time in the library, spent a lot of time in just researching magazines and everything, looking for information. But it was a great experience.
wow. Tell us a little bit about the journey from there. What's your next move?
So my
And
next move, after Dallas Seminary is trying to find a place to do a PhD and really to balance off the evangelical education of DTS, which is a great foundation, but my transcript needed balance. My educational experience needed a balance from Dallas, and so the Lord opened up the door for me to go to Yale. I looked at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. Yale had the best opportunity for me in terms of just being able to have freedom to study in the university as well as the divinity school. And so, as I said, I put a lot of my concentration in on the African American department, the Afro-Am department. Phenomenal scholars there. Um, Studied under John Blassingame, who was at that time just one of the foremost scholars on the antebellum period, and took several courses with him and other writers. It was great relationships that I met. People who were at Yale Law School at that time. Stephen Carter sat in on his classes, did some work with him, and so just great exposure, great exposure.
this is when you make your way to New York, and Dr. Freddie Haynes introduced yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr.
So
Haynes, how,
ultimately that works. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying, how does that evolve into you becoming pastor?
Yeah, it's a long short story. As I said, Dr. Haynes did the revival at Cornerstone every year, and he really put me in touch with Dr. Wright in terms of just building that relationship. I met him in the fall of 1995. They invited me to come preach in the spring of 1996. Then I did an internship that summer, and then they offered me the opportunity to come on staff. I was on staff for 5 years, and when Dr. Wright retired, the church voted to suspend the bylaws and just accept me as his predecessor. So I became the eighth pastor in the fall of 2003.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the Cliff Notes version.
Tell us about the history of Cornerstone. Um, is a staple in church history. Tell us about the history and sort of the legacy that the shoulders you stand on.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal ministry in the Bedford Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, New York. Our church is 103 years old. My immediate past predecessor was Dr. Sandy Frederick Ray. He came to Cornerstone in 1944, and along with Gardner Taylor, Bill Jones, and Adam Clayton Powell in Harlem, and Dr. Proctor later in Harlem, they had just a real deep uh, church persona, and they really make up the last vestige of, again, what we call the Great Migration. And so just coming into that history was phenomenal to meet people. In fact, Dr. Gardner Taylor installed me as pastor of Cornerstone,
Wow.
and he just getting to know him before he moved to North Carolina in his retirement years. But just being with those giants. For me, I'd always read about them in seminary and grad school. Dr. Calvin Butts at the Abyssinian Church in Harlem, and that great legacy. And so just being around them and just hearing them talk about you know, history and protest marches and just transitioning those migrants from the south to the north, just an indelible impression.
Wow, that's amazing. What is the your first years as pastor Cornerstone like? Uh, just generally speaking, to your present day sort of pre-COVID-19, obviously.
Yeah, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been pastor for 17 years now, and I would say, definitely, even as any church growth expert would tell you, the first 5, 7, 10 years, you're transitioning a ministry. And so the blessing for me was that I was on staff for 5 years. And so I had a good idea about the calendar of the church, the pace of the church. And so I was able to gingerly turn corners in terms of our tradition and just get us, where we needed to be. And in terms of technology, music, which is that's probably the biggest civil war anybody has, going to a traditional church, transitioning from a chancel choir, a senior choir that does a procession, and then ultimately transitioning into a band for praise and worship. So, but of course, those things don't happen overnight, but it just takes time and preaching and praying and being able to disciple your leaders.
How did you establish your own voice from a preaching standpoint, following legends like that? What's your self-actualization, not just as a preacher, but as a preacher, pastor, in the church with such a rich history?
For me, once again, I think really having those 5 years on staff helped me a lot, because I would always preach once a month. And so once I became pastor, the people were used to my voice. They were used to me preaching, and I was used to them. I was comfortable with them. But really just going through the growing pains of transitioning as a staff minister, preaching once a month, to senior pastor, preaching every Sunday. And as you know, once you start preaching every Sunday, the day goes Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday.
Right.
Okay, so the weeks get shorter, and all of the responsibilities that you have in between. But it's really just been, one Sunday at a time, just building the momentum and establishing relationships and partnering with people and once again with mentors. Yeah.
That's great. Tell us the first time you are hearing about COVID-19, your process and having to go virtual, how you navigate through those waters.
Yeah, I think our last Sunday with in-person worship was the third Sunday in March. And so even on that weekend, we started curtailing things, but not to the nature where we are today. But I think that was a tremendous wake-up call and realization that something is ahead that we've never seen before. And so we've been able to, like everyone else, make that transition, moderate staff schedules. But interestingly enough, George, our church is still open 7 days a week, because if you
I think we lost Dr. Aker there for a second. We're here live with Pastor Lawerence Aker III, pastor of the Cornerstone, historical Cornerstone Baptist Church in the borough of Brooklyn, New York. He's been sharing with us background. We're getting to know him a little bit better. We're now turning the corner to talk about COVID-19.
Hey, George, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot see you, but I can
hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can see you. Please share this page, even as we're yet working through our kinks. Please share this. All of you know at this point, techno.
Oh, George, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you on this side. I can hear you on this side. We were just digging in here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to work through these technical difficulties here. As we work through these technical difficulties, please be on the lookout this week. From preaching today, Pastor Matt Woodley will be here with us. And then on tomorrow, we have some powerful women of God that will be with us. The Bailey family, led by the patriarch, Dr. Sheila Bailey, and her two wonderful daughters who God is using in mighty, mighty ways to advance the kingdom of Jesus as the Christ. Share this page as Dr. Aker is
I can't.
fixing his
I
uh,
don't know what's happening. We're having tech
uh,
difficulties again. I can see you. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
cool. We'll get through those technical difficulties. Continue to tell us. Continue to tell us more about how you navigated through COVID-19. I don't think he can hear us. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to have him get off and come back on. We're going to have him get off, come back on. We're grateful and thankful for you tuning in. Just be patient with us. Dr. Akers is going to uh, remove himself from the stream, and then he's going to come back into the studio. Be on the lookout for tomorrow. Pray us through these technical difficulties right here, because we certainly want to hear how this great man of God navigated through the treacherous waters that were created by COVID-19. Please, ma'am, please, sir, go to our YouTube channel and check out past interviews. Dr. Maurice Watson, Dr. Freddie Haynes, Dr. William Curtis, Dr. Ralph West, Sister Sharita West are just some. Dr. Marvin McMickle, are just some of the highlights there. There's probably over 30 interviews from some of the greatest minds in the church speaking to us there. So make sure that you do that. So we are going to work on getting Dr. Akers back in here. Let me say some things about what is taking place in our culture, what we need to be mindful here as believers. I want to take this opportunity as we get Dr. Akers back in here. I want to take this opportunity to talk to us about what's taking place in our nation, what things we need to be mindful of as they are taking place with us. Is first and foremost to ensure that we are cautious in our reopening. We want to remember, especially those of us that have the vulnerable population, a vulnerable population in our church. And if you are doing the research, if you look at the interview from Dr. McMickle, African Americans are inherently, intrinsically, automatically a part of that vulnerable population. And so those are things that you have to pray through, you have to be mindful of, and to ensure that we are not rushing. Federal leadership, we'll just leave it at that. Federal leadership does not have the capacity or sensitivity, have proven not to have the capacity or sensitivity to what is taking place in our land with this pandemic to lead us successfully and knowledgeably through it. So it's going to take us implementing James 1 and 5, asking God for wisdom, trusting and having faith. Like verses 6 tells us, when we ask him for that wisdom, that he's able to provide us with the insight. Wisdom is something that we will be able to glean from in a very unique way on tomorrow, as we are so excited about our guests on tomorrow that will be with us. The only thing I'm worried about is not robbing their time, not having them here longer than we need to and necessarily know how to get through that. So let's please be mindful of that. So let's please, as those of you that are church leaders out there, I know how uncomfortable, trust me, how uncomfortable these times are. I know how comfortable these times are of social distancing, wearing masks. And I know there is something inside of us to say, is this really as deep as they're making it seem out to be? And all I want you to remember is 120,000. 120,000 people have lost their life. We saw other day a famous comedian fall out on stage, then later test positive the COVID-19. We're not sure if there was a correlation or causation to that, but it is safe to expect so. It's safe to assume so. And so we want to, in these times, be very mindful of the fact that as believers of God, the church is still open. Virtual church does not limit it. The letters that we read is virtual church of the days. Paul was not in Rome. Paul was in Rome in prison when he writes Philippians and Ephesians. Some of his most powerful letters come from what is our equivalent of that day of virtual church. Sending information, dispersing information through the channels of technology of that day to ensure that the church was equipped to do ministry. And so as long as we're here, we got to maximize our time here, and we don't have to rush because one of the things I believe that God is doing during this time is removing the idols of worship. Dr. Akers, we're going to try one more time to get him in there. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. No, I lost you again. I'm back.
All right. It's no doubt in my mind you got some information that's going to help some leaders out there. And so we're gonna fight through this thing
Let's fight through it.
Fight through this thing. Tell us again. You're right there with us, talking to us about COVID-19.
Yeah.
Cornerstone Baptist Church and how you was processing that information through all that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, COVID hit New York hard. We're in the epicenter, and I was saying that our church is still open like 7 days a week. We got a partnership with World Central Kitchen, which has just been awesome. We started off doing, which is Chef Jose Andres. We started off doing 500 meals a day. Then they upped us to 1,000 meals a day. And now they upped us to 2,000 meals a day. Wow. So that's 6 days a week. So you think about it, you do the math, that's 12,000 families in the community a week that we're able to get fresh food to, fruit, vegetables, fresh meals. About 48,000 families a month that we're able to reach, almost 50,000 families a month. So we're just grateful for that, to have that impact in this season. With our churches in the neighborhood, we've been rotating as far as testing centers. And so Bethany, Baptist Street, Pastor Dolphus Lacey, he's been a testing center. One of our colleagues, Dr. Stephen Carter, he's been a testing center. And so, we're all doing our part, trying to do our part in terms of, and we got, the governor gave us 7,000 masks and about like 25,000 bottles of spray sanitizer. And so we get that out every week. But these are just sanitizer. You wouldn't think about what a precious item, precious commodity that is right now. But these are things that prayerfully we hope we're making a difference.
Absolutely, man. I can tell from here you're making a difference. I know from our conversation you're making a difference as well. Tell us, as a pastor, and people may not know this or understand this, but pastors are more busy now in this pandemic than they ever have been. And tell us how, as a shepherd, you stayed in tune with your people. Tell us how, as a shepherd, you've been navigating through how to present the word of God to them on Sunday.
Yeah, technologically, things have shifted to an online ministry for all of us across the globe, really. And so certainly that time is our opportunity to do the gospel with the broadcast. And then this Sunday, we're taking a page from you with StreamYard to start our Cornerstone Lounge after service. And so at 12 o'clock, well, we'll broadcast at 9 and 11, and then at 12 o'clock, we'll have the Cornerstone Lounge I don't know if that's the official name. The millennials told me I need a better name. So they told me that in the staff meeting Monday. They said they'll think of something and they'll tell me. But for now, that's what it is, and we'll launch that Sunday. So I'm excited about doing ministry in this way. But also, we are one church, 4 to 5 generations, builders, boomers, busters, Gen X, Gen Y. And so we want to make sure that we have something for everyone. We'll probably try to go back on television on our local cable access stations for some of our seniors who have not been able to technologically come along. But we want to make sure that we're reaching everybody.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Then, right when we're navigating, figuring out, trying to, no time, this is going to happen in 6 weeks. All of a sudden, we're a digital church by mandate.
Right.
George Floyd happens. The modern
Yes.
mention of our dear brother takes place,
Yes.
and the country seemingly gets to a point that many of us already have been and already know. It leads to protests. It leads to people just sort of kicking to the side the notion of physical distancing, social distancing, quarantining, outrage. There's been killings of others. Since then, when I speak of others, I'm not talking about Rashad Brooks. I'm thinking of just violence.
Breonna Taylor, just the climate.
Not just those cases, but also retaliation cases with cops and looting and rioting. And I guess when all this is happening, we just got off a podcast. Many, if we could be honest and straightforward, white people have been calling with this sort of enlightening, awakening, or whatever you may want to label that as. Kumbaya moments of cleansing and healing. And it's a lot to kind of process. You have other things thrown out, such as defunding the police, tearing down monuments. Just as free as you want to, take a moment and talk to us how you've been processing these things as an intellectual giant, one that's always been on the front line of social consciousness. How you've been processing these things, and feel free to comment on how much of this and whatever detail as you hear.
Yeah, well, I would just kind of add, these are things that work in segments of different layers. As I said earlier, we're in the COVID-19 pandemic, but we know as people of color, the pandemic of racism has plagued our nation since its inception. And, just in terms of the history of African Americans, people will start us in 1619, but Ivan Van Sertima said they came before Columbus, speaking of our ancestors. And so even though for history books in some school districts and even some historians like Arnold Toynbee, they relegate us to just a slave group from the African diaspora. But to just kind of answer your question and merge that all together, we know that the lynching of George Floyd is not the beginning of this racial reconciliation or this kumbaya moment, but this has just been the boiling point in terms of what we're saying now. Malcolm Gladwell calls the blinking point. But just in terms of looking at century by century, decade by decade, just the continual loss and harassment of Black life from the Civil War to the Great Reconstruction of 1877. Rutherford B. Hayes and the presidential deal that's covered with the North and the South, and removing those federal troops out of the South, which starts the Klan riders that had plagued the African American community since that 19th century moment. And then you move up into the Great Migration, leaving those cotton fields and sharecroppers, which was just another form of slavery, to get to the North and to get to better jobs. And we battle through that, we go through that. And then the Civil Rights era, with Dr. King and Rosa Parks from Montgomery in 1955 all the way up to 1968 and beyond, even after his assassination, but just trying to fight for equality. Glass ceilings in the 70s and 80s, and then ultimately the election of Barack Obama, which others will say now we have a colorblind society, or as Mitch McConnell said, that reparations don't have to be paid because Barack Obama was elected, things of that nature. And now when Trayvon Martin, kind of, that's another catapult once again in racial violence that awakened the country. And I know we hadn't got to this yet, but just in terms of resources, that 6-part documentary, Rest in Power, on the life of Trayvon Martin is just phenomenal. And I've been watching that with my kids and just seeing everything that took place. And from there to Ferguson and then where we are now, Eric Garner here in New York. I was with you that when we saw him on video getting choked. I was coming back from New York, and I just couldn't believe on video that you see him in a chokehold. And 5 years, takes 5 years to get Daniel Pantaleo, that cop. It takes 5 years to get him fired. During those 5 years, he's sitting at a desk making $120,000 a year. And so 5 years later, last year, he finally got fired, last summer in August. So, the George Floyd is just beyond credulity that we could see someone choke, beg for water, beg for mercy, and now the expediency of seeing those officers lose their jobs. I know it went viral this weekend that one of the former officers, they saw him shopping in one of the local stores in Minneapolis there, and that went viral. But it's just unconscionable that they could, still be free, be out on bail, and one of the most heinous crimes of the 21st century.
Yeah, you dealt. First of all, you took us to school in history, and thank you for that. And you did it very efficiently as well. You touched on a lot of critical issues. I want to ask you a question as a believer. What level of empathy should we have for police officers? Difficulty of their job, and also the training and lack thereof that they receive in kind of handling the situations that they have failed to handle effectively, continuously over and over again. And I have a follow up to that, but how much empathy should we have for that?
I think there's certainly a place for empathy. We have good cops that are faced with bad people, and then we have good people that are faced with bad cops. And unfortunately, the narrative that we continually see is the latter. And so, yeah, police officers that are hardworking, protecting the peace, protecting the community, those, I guess that's, in some circles we're hearing that it's 99.9% good cops and there's just bad apples, but the bad apples are getting a lot of film time. Bad apples are getting too much video, and it leads to the face that it is a systematic problem. But yeah, sure, certainly we have empathy. I try to work with my departments here in New York. I've ridden in squad cars, and yeah, there's certain times when the temperature goes up, the crime goes up. The temperature goes down in the winter months, crime will be a little lower, but that there's still that respect of the community, as we've heard so often, that policemen that don't live in our community, they police us and they protect other communities. And so that's hopefully, and when you talk about defund the police, I think that gets a little misconstrued because people think you just want to disband the legal entity altogether. But if we can differentiate those funds and get programs for youth and get programs for training, but that's just one step. That's one step. We're talking about a tremendous overhaul of the psyche, and just not seeing all African American males as predators.
Hmm. Yeah. Again, well said. Much to deal with and much to unpack there. When we say things such as defunding the police, or even
Hmm.
some on the surface, Black Lives Matter, and it's just interesting to me how people can be nuanced when they want to be nuanced, and how people can be technical when they want to be technical.
Be technical. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those who may wave the Confederate flag, well, they're right. Um,
Right. Right.
and they want us to get into the deeper interpretation of why you raised the Confederate flag. Those that have statues of people who held owned slave, they want us to get more information about who they were and why these
And we
statues.
know, we know who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more, I mean, there's nothing you can do to change the legacy of General Robert E. Lee. He
Yeah,
was a slave owner. He was a vicious slave master.
Tyranny and treason.
Even
Yeah,
treason. And
terror.
even his biographer, I think his last name is Jennings. His biography was done in like the 1930s, and he basically puts uh, Lee in sainthood, and he only talks about slavery and slaves about 5 times in the book. But I mean, you can look at those primary documents, and you see the accounts of escaped slaves from the Norris family. They escaped, and when they were brought back, not only did he have them whipped, and he paid the constable, he said put it on them, and he put salt in their wounds after they've been beaten. In fact, because his wife, I believe, is the granddaughter. His wife was the granddaughter of George Washington, and so he inherited all the slaves at the Arlington House. And so by 1860, he inherited those slaves in 1857. By 1860, he had disbanded every family on that plantation except for one. And so he broke up all of those families through. So, I mean, in Psalm, once again, there's no way you want a statue to somebody like that.
Yeah,
There's no pride or anything that encourages. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so black and white. But the point I was
Right.
making, and you're accentuating, is that is the call for to be going in depth. We can't just we understand the need to go in depth. So when we say things or do things, you take Colin Kaepernick and kneeling and so unquote disrespectful to the flag. These same people want to fly the Confederate flag that was a flag of treason,
Exactly.
not just moral depression. As Brian Stevenson says, the ills of slavery has not just free labor, but the psychology that was attached to that reality. We understand that slavery is a historical concept, but the way it was adapted and the way it unfolded in American history, especially towards those of African descent, is something that has not, at least in my study of history, has not took place on that level.
No.
We LA, we got a problem. It seems as if those of us that are conscious, many of us, not all, because Black people are not monolithic, but most Black preachers, we're saying something that's not clearly translating. Forget about Trump, forget about Mitch McConnell. It's not translating to other white preachers, white Christians, white church leaders. And that's not to indict all, but it is a strong percentage. Whatever that percentage is, if it's more than 1%, it's strong for those that are being oppressed or being overlooked or mistreated. You are one that, because of my relationship, was able to be on Preaching Today recently. You're one that historically crossed over into those spheres. How do we do that and maintain a sense of love and balance, and while trying to patiently and lovingly um, educate those that should already be educated on this issue?
Well, I think the first thing, it just starts with discussion, and we have those doors are open, and just trying to get accountability and discussion to understand where I'm coming from, to understand my heritage and my history. But I saw a quote that said I'd rather in terms of those dialogues, I'd rather deal with my white friends and stress to them the importance of culture and the happenings, and really edify them in that sense. And that discussion is just step one. Of course, we've been having discussions and forums and think tanks for years, and we get caught into the semantics and the nomenclatures. Black lives are all lives, but still, I'd rather just have that tough conversation with my white friends than to have to bury my black friends.
Wow, that hits home. I want to ask you a question, and you can help maybe myself and others who may be tired of the invitations to have the conversation, tired of having to be the educator on something that should be fundamental because it's so engraved into the American history and American experience. So you wouldn't seemingly have to tell anybody about the Boston Tea Party, which is interesting because that's looting, that's standing up against government, that's civil disobedience, that's civil unrest. And these are some of the things that we'll hear from the other side not to do, and how to submit, and using scripture out of context and things of that nature.
I lost you again.
Yeah, can you hear me? All right. Well, right, again, when we get a little heated there, things are going to shift. Dr. Akers, if you can leave out and come back into the studio. My question, and I guess time for commentary as Dr. Aker comes in, and he's our guest, and because of technical difficulties, we're going to slide in a little bit and speak. It is definitely time, in my opinion, for the conversation to cease and for us to start having a real action steps towards reparation. And when I say reparation, I'm speaking more nuanced than simply a check. I'm speaking of more than even the U.S. government. I think institutions like universities, institutions like Southern Baptist Convention, all of these historical organizations that have made their money and built their legacy off of the mistreatment, undertreatment of African descendants of slaves need to play some sense of retribution to those realities. Dr. Aker, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Good. You can hear us. So you were beginning to unfold to us. I was speaking while you were out about the need to come past these conversations. I'm tired of the conversations. I'm tired of people crying. I think the other day I saw somebody shining somebody's shoes. The owner of Chick-fil-A shining Latrey's shoes. That's not gonna do nothing.
Yeah.
We need reparation. And when I say reparation, is nuanced. It's not just a check. You do need a check. You owe us, okay? Right. You can pay it out in 10 years, 15 years, however you want to do it. We'll charge you a modern day interest rate. We do need that from housing, because that has been systemically oppressive to our people. We need that for education, some of these institutions, but we need that for institutions like the Southern Baptist Convention, who put sheets on their head historically and hung our people from trees. These are historical facts, documented isolation that has taken place in their philosophy, using scripture for manipulation, of the minds of not just Black people, but even their followers, to justify their heinous thinking and acts. And so we no more conversations, checks, opportunities, positions of power. We have the ability.
Yeah.
The ability is there at this point. The level of intellects and level of minds that exists within the construct of our community is unlimited. You can put some names in the hat, reach in and grab it, and you're gonna find qualified individuals and people. What say thou about some of those things there?
Yeah, well, I think that's a double-edged sword, and that's something that we will continue to see unveil. Just going back to Garveyism. Marcus Garvey wanted to go back to Africa. Even Robert E. Lee was helpful in sending some slaves that were free back to Liberia. And so there's always that juxtaposition. Is it just the opportunity, the empowerment zones, but still there's nothing that can make up for the years and years of just inequity that has been dealt the people of color, especially when you talk about financially. When you look at the Royal African Merchant Companies in the 1600s and 1700s, all the millions that they were making then, and that's money that's been passed down from generations, and to have us as a people to just start fresh with nothing from 1863 on. And certainly we've come a long way, and we've achieved much success, but there's still so much work to be done. So I guess to kind of narrow that a little more, where does this help come from, or what does it look like? And I totally agree with you. It's time to put things on the table and to make it happen. Just the reconciliation retreats and the apologies and things of that nature. That's received, but that does not expedite equality. And so I think that's the big thing that we will see with these foundations, and all of this is just a scab, a wound that's been totally open right now. And so where we are at this midpoint in 2020, where we will be in after this election year, and prayerfully we'll have a new commander in chief. But I think I'm cautiously optimistic. I still think other progresses or other achievements will be had, but we will still have this battle until the rapture.
Yeah, we'll be wrestling with this. It was all great in this country because
that beloved community that Dr. King talked about. That's not going to come. Frederick Douglass said, "Power conceives nothing without a struggle. It never has, and it never will." So, yeah.
We had the opportunity collectively to be in South Africa and to visit Roberts Island, where Nelson Mandela was in prison for so many years. Talk to me about history, international perspective, and looking through those lenses through the American construct and what we are facing here, and how that feeds your perspective, be it whatever.
Yeah, I mean that was phenomenal. You and I were on that boat, that ride from Cape Town to Robben Island, and we walked through. We saw the facility. You were in the cell, I was in the cell. We saw letters ripped up. We saw the cruelty of apartheid, and just knowing the history of Robben Island, how it started off as a place for lepers. And even while they had lepers there, they had a place for white lepers and a place for African lepers. You couldn't even be sick in peace. So I mean, it was a phenomenal experience to be there. But yeah, just that cross Atlantic foliage and personalities, all the tomboy and people who are held in such high uh, standards in South Africa who fought for equality, and seeing the apartheid museum and just putting all that into perspective, Stephen Biko and the Soweto uprising, and there's just to see those shanties and to know that the Dutch, diamond people, how they were able to get so much power and so much land. And you and I have talked about this again, just driving around and riding around in South Africa, and just the feeling of being at home but still being uneasy, and just to see how far they have come, and then still how much further they have to go.
Yeah, wow. That's so true. Can you translate that into how that feeds your perspective of the American experience?
Well, I think if you rated South Africa and Pretoria and Sun City and rated, where America is today, it's still the unequal treatment of people of color. I remember when we were in South Africa, one of the pastors that I was with, we were in one of the malls kind of walking around, and I wanted to go in a store, and he didn't want to go in. I said, why not? He said, well, they're not gonna wait on me. They're gonna ignore me. I said, well, they're gonna do the same thing to me. He said, no, once they hear your accent and they find out you're American, they'll want to dialogue with you. They'll probably serve you and trade you. I was like, well, that's no problem. I don't have to go in there. But still, even when we were in South Africa, we look the same as the people there until we open our mouths and we have an American accent, or same when we're in Haiti. We look the same until we open up our mouth and they hear a distinct accent. That's the only thing that may get us, a little bit of preferential treatment, but it's still not equality across the board.
Wow, that's a critical point to make, and seeing how what we experience here and how the face of that across the globe, and trying
Yeah,
to make sense of that from a global perspective, makes trying to make sense of it from a more local perspective.
yeah.
Uh,
And then just the stigmas that they have. I mean, we were always taught through Tarzan movies and things that they were savages, and then they see videos of us that we're all rappers and that our pants are hanging down. That's everybody's American narrative for people of color. And so, it's good to have that dialogue once again and see the richness of our culture.
where do you see things going in these next 3 to 4 months? We got an election coming up. Uh,
Hmm.
we're still navigating through what I think is going to be a slope of up and down, open, not open,
Yeah,
cases dropping, cases picking back up. How do you
yeah.
see the church, I guess, uh, role that she will play in the midst of all this?
Well, we can't say it enough. These are unprecedented times. You can try to do reentry. You can try to go back to business as normal, but as we know, normal wasn't working for people of color to begin with. And we see people that have gone back too early, and we see the resurgence and the spikes. And so, yeah, I mean, this next 90 to 120-day period will reveal to us a lot. Even as we try to get back to the world of sports, and you see so many athletes who are testing positive, and so this is really, I don't know, George. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have anything. That's my deep answer. I don't know. But I want to prepare for it. I want to encourage our people along the way and plan and see where we go. But this plague that we have right now is really dominating what we do.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, because that's a great response. I don't know, but I need to plan and shape
Yeah.
things around the unknown. And I think that's one of the things that's
Right.
keeping us up at night, that's stressing us out.
Right.
And I'm thinking of pastors here. What are some of the things that you're doing just to get ready for what you're not sure you're getting ready for?
Yeah. What to do when you don't know what to do? It's just preaching every week, and as you said, we're working harder now because with the digital element and a digital campus, you can get more done, and you can find yourself easily at a 21 hour a day Zoom calls, StreamYard, Facebook, IG Live, all of the avenues that we have in order to reach people. But just in terms of planning and trying to look ahead and seeing what sister churches are doing, what other pastors, great leaders around the country are doing, and just trying to see what the DNA for our ministry is in all of that.
Yeah, that's a powerful reminder too about trying to keep it in the context of where you're doing ministry and what you have to wrestle through and fight through. Tell us
Right.
how when your service meet. Tell us where your social media is.
Okay.
Tell us some of the things that either personally or the church have coming up that the people will be of interest of.
Yeah, we're streaming at 9 and 11, Facebook Live, and on our website cbcbrooklyn.org, and that's our social platform. We have some other things that we're launching this quarter in terms of redoing our logo and just some great outreach things we're doing. And I mentioned with our lounge, excited about that. I know a lot of people have already initiated those types of connections, and so we're doing that. And so we're trying to make sure we have something to engage our people every day of the week in which they want to reach out, and
Yeah,
that we're there, not to oversaturate, but to just have that presence right now. I guess if I can sum it in a sentence, I'm working on the ministry of presence.
man, that's good. How would you define yourself as a preacher, and how do you think your preaching has evolved over the years?
I would define myself as an expository preacher, and I think over the years, definitely preaching every Sunday has been a blessing and a learning process. Uh, blessed with, I've been blessed with a lot of great mentors: Dr. Ralph West, Dr. Joel Gregory, Dr. John Jenkins, and so many people that have invested in me and given me opportunities to share and to learn the craft of pastoring. And I think um, as I've focused on learning how to pastor, it is also as a byproduct help my preaching.
How would you diagnose preaching today?
In terms of our culture, where it is in the world, or
All three.
how do you? There you go. I think our preaching today is venue specific for everyone. You have to work within your zip code. Um, for those of us who are in an urban context, where we don't have parking lots, where we don't have transportation, where we have different challenges, we have to reach people in a different way. Whereas people who are in a more suburban context, good jobs, good industries, and constantly have people coming in, new families moving in, they're able to do ministry in a different way. But New York is just is different. It's different. I consider myself a Southerner and a little bit of the West Coast, but New York is different. I've been blessed to be here now almost 22 years of my life, and but it's a good field. It's a good ministry field.
Wow.
Challenging.
Yeah. What would you say in life that you haven't accomplished that you would like to accomplish?
Well, I would say on my bucket list academically is to finish school. I was working on my PhD a few years ago, and my wife and I, Cynthia, were blessed with three children. Two are in college right now. Our youngest will be a freshman in high school, and so I was actually working on my PhD when our oldest children were being born, and so really I had a choice between going to the library and working for hours or just rolling on the carpet with these little babies, and I chose to roll on the carpet. So
Yeah.
now I'm going to be a late bloomer, but that's a goal right now is to finish school, and so I've got some good leads to prayerfully get that done, and mentors who are pushing me.
What would you want to study?
I think I want to do a compilation between preaching and church history. Those are my academic loves, if you will. But I'm going to really focus on what I want to write about and what I have a passion about. So those would be two areas that ring a bell for me.
What advice would you give to a young preacher pastor that's trying to find his voice in the midst of so many voices out there, from T.D. Jakes to you name it, and they're trying to find their authentic voice?
Mhm.
What advice would you give to someone that was kind of wrestling through that, to the more teaching style? You hear people say, as far as leading their church, emphasizing digital or emphasizing the in person. What advice would you give them?
I think once again it starts with mentorship. Find someone, find a style, find a church, and just get under that person, and also just your your crowd, your fellow preachers that you associate with. Find people who are pushing you. You heard it said before, if you're the smartest one in your circle, you need to expand your circle. So find other people who have your passion, and don't be intimidated to find people that know more than you are, or that know stuff that you don't know. I mean, you can spend your time hating and criticizing, but if you reach out to people, it helps you get to another level. So my advice to a young preacher pastor, I mean, T.D. Jakes is one of the most phenomenal narrative preachers in the world. Um, you have other preachers that do exposition. Tony Evans is one of the most phenomenal expository preachers in the nation. And so find people who you can sit under, because they don't necessarily have to uh, be with you physically and personally to mentor you, especially in this digital age. Like I said, I'm thankful for the mentors that I have, and the pastors who continue to pour into me. And so I think if you just find people who can encourage you and lift you from your marriage to your finances, it's a team. Find a team of mentors.
Wow, I find that tremendously helpful because you didn't give a silver bullet answer or a cliche. No, a lot of times people answer that very cliche-ish, and I think starting with that mentorship, my life has been a very minimal as it relates to successes, but those
Hmm.
minimal successes that I had experienced
Mm.
have been caused by those who've been around me as it relates to development and discipleship and mentorship, as you mentioned. So I find
Yes.
that to be a wonderful answer. Thank you so much for sharing it. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we had a lot of technical
A lot of
issues.
glitches today,
Yeah,
man. It's
and that happens in this new digital world. And I think that this has been very, not think, I know this has been very insightful and enlightening to myself and others that have been listening. We're going to close out on something a little bit light and then ask for you to cover this time in prayer.
sure.
Let's talk about this sports world.
All
Where are
right.
you on all this that is taking place? Do we need it back? Should it be held off? Is this a time for athletes to be revolutionists? Or are you just ready to see some sports, man? Tell me where you at and all that.
No, man, I love sports. I'm an avid sports fan. My football team is the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly the Oakland Raiders.
Lord have mercy.
I make it out to home games in Alameda, and so now they'll be in Vegas. So, but I am excited to see athletes taking a stand and being revolutionists. And as they said on the opening of the ESPYS, Black Lives Matter, or do Black Lives Matter only when they're getting rebounds and throwing touchdowns, but when do Black lives really matter? So I'm glad to see uh, men and women using their platform, and because they have a very powerful platform.
Wow.
But I definitely, we're here, Brooklyn Nets. We got KD and Kyrie. So that's it's going to be great to finally see them together on the court. I'd like to see LeBron get one with the Lakers. Um, Being from Oakland, I got mad love for Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and probably the Greek Freak going to come over from Milwaukee and join the Warriors. So we'll see all that, how all that unfolds. But yeah, man, definitely love sports. It's a great thing, but we have so many pressing matters right now. I can wait.
Wow, you were very concrete on football, but you were all over the place in basketball. I mean, you seem like you on 9 champions, man.
I'm California,
You on the
California.
Oakland and
I'm
Brooklyn
the
and
five
Lakers,
five one zero
Greek
510
Freak.
area
I
code.
mean,
I'm
uh,
I'm I'm prophesying. I'm prophesying about the free
man,
agent market.
you
That's
on
all.
like 10
I'm just
champions.
prophesying about the free agent market. I'm prophesying about the free agent market. That's all. That's all.
Man, listen, man, listen. I really feel, LA. We probably should just pass on sports right now. I know how
Yeah.
entertaining it is. I know how bad someone like
Right.
Brian would want to play because his window is steadily closing, and I'm
Yeah.
LeBron James has calibrated to he's number one on my list of all time
Yeah.
athletes at this point. And I
Well,
know
I
that.
thought you were a Michael Jordan fan.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You did not think that at all. There's nothing that I like about Michael Jordan. Nothing that I like about Michael Jordan. He pledged 100. What was it? $100 million, which
ten
I
years over 10 years.
over 10 years. So I would love to know where that's going. And that's another thing we didn't get into a conversation about the black agenda and where does resources. If we had $10 billion right now. Where does
Hmm.
that go?
Hmm.
How does that get dispersed? I don't
Yeah.
think that's a conversation. I don't think there ever will be
Yeah.
a uniform voice in those things because we are such different people, and I
Yeah.
don't think we have to.
But that's why
Um,
I said there's no formula, but I mean that's not a cop out to say, but something has to be done in terms of
yeah,
education, in terms of housing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think you're absolutely right about that. But yeah, that's where I stand. I love sports. Sports is a part of my evolving and as a man, and as an intellect.
absolutely.
The first thing I studied was sports from an introspective standpoint. But I think during these time, COVID especially, COVID more than the civil
Yeah,
unrest. But I think
yeah,
also it would be something special that see the black athlete say, no, we're going to focus on some things as far as voters' rights, implementing policy, raising funds for this and that. I know that's sort of a pipe dream. I know others would say they could do that at the same time, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you could be focused on.
I think you have the attention of the world right now, and you have that power in your hand. You have that platform. So yeah, I mean, it just watching the Game 7 right now wouldn't be that exciting to me when I know what's going on out in the streets.
And they don't suffer from the platform, like they could get on Instagram Live right now and 10 million people will show up. So they don't need ABC and ESPN to create platform information. They call any news network, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, and they're going to have them on because they're such a rating push. So the whole concept and that they'll reach so many people is not singularly.
You're right. It's just the fact that Patrick Mahomes and Odell Beckham Jr. and go on, that they could do a 10-second, 15-second spiel and force Roger Goodell into an apology. That shows the power. I think they're realizing what a sleeping giant they are, what they have been.
Yeah, I would love them to force him to resign because of his acts more than an apology. But apology, that was good. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're making $27 million a year, you're not going to ask me and her to give that up.
No, sir. No, sir.
It's going to take an act of Congress to get him out of that.
The thing that you're running runs on automatic pilot. Like we don't really need anybody to help us tell you how to hut one, hut two. It's the system is inherently
just a figurehead, well-paid figurehead.
Close us out in prayer, please, bro.
All right. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for this time of discussion. We thank you for world events. Most of all, we thank you that the world is in your hands. And so we ask now special blessings on Pastor George Hurt, a friend to so many. Thank you for this platform and vision that you've given him to interview and to touch bases with so many. We ask a special blessing on the Mount Sinai family and their work in Los Angeles and in Africa and beyond. Keep us and bless us as only you can. This we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for listening. Please share this. Be on the lookout tomorrow, 1 Pacific, 3 Central, 4 Eastern time. The value of women during these crises, COVID-19, civil unrest.
Got some great guests.
Bailey and her two wonderful daughters, Shanika and Kokisha, will be with us. And then on Thursday, Pastor Matt Woodley of Preaching Today will be with us. Me and Dr. Akers was on the podcast of Preaching Today. I think you can find that on one of their platforms of Preaching Today and hear us.
It's going to air this week. It's going to drop this week.
It's going to drop soon.
You have a great time. You got my family on tomorrow, George. Those are my cousins and my aunt. So
yeah,
we'll have a great show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank y'all for listening. Share this page, like this, on YouTube, everything else. All right.